The evening air was thick with warmth, wrapping Hayes in a soft embrace as she stepped out of the car. The city buzzed quietly in the distance. But here, in Lucas's apartment, there was only the faint hum of music filtering through the open windows. She had been looking forward to tonight all week. But something about this moment felt different. A quiet tension clung to the air, an unspoken weight resting between them. Lucas greeted her with a smile, his usual easy confidence present. Yet there was something deeper in his eyes. As they moved through dinner, their conversations flowed naturally, yet Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that tonight wasn't just another night. The way his fingers brushed against hers when he passed her a drink. The way he held her gaze a second too long, it all felt deliberate. Charged. By the time they settled into the couch, a comfortable silence between them, Hayes felt her pulse quicken. Something was shifting, an invisible line waiting to be crossed. Was she ready? Was he? The anticipation coiled inside her, heavy with both excitement and uncertainty. Whatever happened tonight, she knew it would change everything. The dim glow of the candles cast flickering shadows on the walls, their golden light reflecting in Lucas's dark eyes. Hayes sat beside him on the couch, close enough to feel his warmth but still keeping a small space between them. The movie played on the screen. Though neither of them was truly paying attention, she could feel the weight of his gaze on her, the way his eyes lingered a little too long, as if searching for something, permission, maybe, or reassurance. Her pulse quickened. She had always been comfortable around him, but tonight, the air felt different, thicker, charged with something unspoken. She reached for her drink, only to realize he had done the same, their fingers brushing against each other in a fleeting touch that sent shivers racing down her spine. A nervous laugh escaped her lips as she glanced at him, but he didn't look away. Instead, he smiled, slow and knowing. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice smooth and rich, carrying a weight that made her stomach twist with anticipation. Hayes swallowed, nodding. "Yeah, just thinking." Lucas leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "About what?" And in that moment, she knew they were both thinking the same thing. The silence between them stretched, thick and humming with tension. The movie flickered on, forgotten, as Hayes felt the space between them grow impossibly small. Her heart pounded, every beat filling the quiet room like a drum. Lucas shifted beside her, his arm resting against the back of the couch. His body turned just enough to face her fully. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but Hayes felt it, felt the way the air between them buzzed with something unsaid. Something inevitable. Then, without thinking, without overanalyzing, Lucas reached out. His fingers, warm and tentative, brushed against her hand where it rested between them. It was barely a touch, but it sent a current of electricity through her, a spark that made her breath hitch in her throat. She could have pulled away, could have pretended not to notice, but she didn't. Instead, she let her fingers curl slightly, inviting him in, allowing the connection to linger. Lucas exhaled, a slow, quiet breath, as though he had been holding it in. His thumb traced a small, lazy circle against her skin, sending another shiver up her arm. When she finally met his gaze, his eyes were searching, questioning. Hayes whispered, "I don't know what this means." Lucas smiled, his fingers tightening around hers. "Then let's find out." The air in the room had shifted. It was heavier now, thick with something unspoken yet undeniable. Hayes could feel it in the way Lucas's eyes traced the curve of her lips, in the way his breathing had slowed, deep and measured, as though he was trying to steady himself. She wasn't sure when the conversation had died down, when the movie had faded into nothing but background noise. But it didn't matter. All that mattered was this charge, unrelenting moment between them. Lucas lifted a hand, hesitated for the briefest second, then brushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingertips lingered against her skin, sending warmth coursing down her spine. Hayes felt her pulse quicken, felt the sharp inhale she tried to conceal. She should have pulled away. She should have laughed it off, made some light-hearted joke to break the tension. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned in just slightly, not enough to close the space, but enough to let him know she felt it too. His gaze flickered to her lips, then back to her eyes, searching, asking a question he wasn't saying out loud. And then, finally, he answered it. Lucas hesitated for only a moment before closing the space between them. His lips met Hayes's in a soft, searching kiss, as if waiting for her to pull away, to stop this before it could go any further. But she didn't. Instead, she melted into him, her fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt as though grounding herself in the moment. The kiss was slow at first, tentative, but then it deepened, the heat between them igniting into something neither of them could ignore. Hayes felt the world around her fade, the flickering candlelight, the quiet hum of the music in the background, the logical part of her mind whispering warnings she no longer wanted to hear. All that existed was the feeling of Lucas's hands tracing the small of her back, his touch igniting every nerve in her body. When they finally pulled apart, her breath was shallow, her heart hammering against her ribs. Lucas's forehead rested against hers, his fingers gently tilting her chin so she'd meet his gaze. His eyes were dark, intense, filled with something she wasn't sure how to name yet. "Tell me this isn't just in my head," he murmured. Hayes swallowed hard. "It's not." In the days that followed, Hayes found herself trapped in a whirlwind of emotions she wasn't sure how to navigate. The kiss had changed everything. It lingered on her lips, in the spaces between their conversations, in the way Lucas looked at her now, like he was seeing something he'd been afraid to acknowledge before. But with that newfound closeness came an unspoken tension, a fragile uncertainty that neither of them dared to address. Lucas was still the same person she had trusted for months. The one who made her laugh when she was overwhelmed. Who knew exactly how she liked her coffee. Who had a way of making her feel like the most important person in the world. But now, there was something deeper beneath the surface. Something neither of them had fully admitted to. Each time their eyes met, the silence stretched between them, thick with questions they weren't ready to answer. Was this real? Were they willing to risk what they had for something unknown? One evening, as they sat side by side on the couch, their fingers barely touching, Lucas exhaled and finally spoke. "Hayes, we need to talk." Her stomach tightened. She knew this moment was coming. She just wasn't sure she was ready to face it. Hayes swallowed hard, her pulse quickening at Lucas's words. She had been avoiding this conversation, afraid of what it might reveal. But now, sitting next to him, their fingers barely touching, she knew there was no more room to run. She turned to him, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. But his gaze was steady, unwavering. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "We do." Lucas exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous habit she had come to recognize. That night, it wasn't just a moment. Was it? His voice was soft but carried the weight of everything left unsaid. Hayes shook her head. "No," she admitted, her throat tightening. "It wasn't." A small, almost relieved smile flickered across his lips. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by something heavier, concern. "Uncertainty. I don't want to lose you," he said, voice laced with vulnerability. Her heart clenched at the raw honesty in his words. "Me neither," she confessed. Silence settled between them again. But this time, it wasn't suffocating. It was filled with possibilities. With the knowledge that whatever came next would change everything. And for the first time, Hayes wasn't afraid of it. The air between them was thick with tension, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on Hayes's chest. She sat on the edge of the couch, her fingers gripping the fabric of her jeans, while Lucas leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. The room was dimly lit, the flickering candlelight casting shadows that mirrored the uncertainty in their hearts. "I don't regret it," Lucas finally said, his voice low but firm. Hayes's breath hitched. She had spent days convincing herself that what happened between them was a mistake. A fleeting lapse in judgment fueled by emotions too complicated to untangle. But hearing him say those words, so sure, so resolute, made her chest tighten in a way she didn't expect. She swallowed hard. "I don't either," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas exhaled, relief flickering in his dark eyes. He reached for her hand. His touch hesitant but warm. Then why does it feel like we're pretending it didn't happen? Because it's easier, she wanted to say. Because if they acknowledged it, they would have to face the reality of what it meant. But instead, she looked at him, and for the first time, she let herself feel everything she had been running from. Hayes stood at the edge of Lucas's apartment. Her fingers curled around the strap of her bag, her pulse racing beneath her skin. She had spent the past few days avoiding this moment, trying to bury what had happened between them beneath layers of denial. But here they were, standing in the quiet hum of the city night, the weight of reality finally catching up to them. Lucas watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to run from this," he said, his voice steady but laced with something softer, something almost pleading. She let out a slow breath, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I'm not running," she said, but even as the words left her lips, they felt like a lie. She had been running, from the truth. From the way he made her feel. From the consequences of wanting something she wasn't sure she could have. Lucas took a step closer, his presence filling the space between them. "Then stay," he murmured, reaching out to brush a stray strand of hair from her face. It was a simple gesture, but it unraveled her. For a moment, she stood at the crossroads of hesitation and surrender. And then, with a breathless nod, she chose to stay. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting soft, golden streaks across the sheets. Hayes lay still, her body curled slightly as she listened to the quiet rhythm of Lucas's breathing beside her. The night had been filled with whispered confessions and moments of raw honesty. But as the sun rose, so did the weight of reality. She turned onto her back, staring at the ceiling, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. What they had, whatever it was, felt intoxicating, electric, but it also felt fragile. Like the thin glass of a window before a storm. She could feel the questions pressing in, the ones she had been too afraid to ask. Where did they go from here? Was this something real, or just a fleeting connection built on emotions they weren't ready to face? Lucas stirred beside her, his hand finding hers beneath the covers. His touch was warm, grounding, as if he could sense the battle waging inside her. "You're overthinking again," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep. She let out a soft, breathless laugh. "Maybe." He squeezed her fingers gently. "Then stop. Just be here. And for now, just for this moment," she did. In today's fast-paced world, relationships often face uncertainty, miscommunication, and emotional turbulence. Hayes and Lucas's story highlights the importance of being present, communicating openly, and embracing vulnerability. Many people struggle with overthinking, questioning their emotions, or fearing the unknown. But real connections require trust and the courage to navigate the uncertainties together. If you find yourself in a similar situation, take a step back, breathe, and allow yourself to experience the present without letting fear dictate your choices. Whether in love, friendship, or personal growth, cherish the moments that feel right and communicate honestly about what you truly want.